Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. Apologies, we've had a couple of weeks off here, but you're with here with me, Steve Wyss, and Jonathan Fadugba. Great to have you, as always, my friend. I hope things are well with you.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone. Yes, I have to hold my hands up. It's me to blame for the absence last week. Steve was good and ready to go, but I had, unfortunately, some other commitments, which meant I had to miss the pod, which was a big shame. But we are back and happy to be with you again to bring you a new episode. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously catching up on all the latest from Norway and Sweden. And of course, we also need to speak about the European games. Obviously, Champions League, Europa League and Conference League all get up and running this week. And we are going to look at every single team and draw and give you a bit of a preview of what we can look forward to in the next few months before the World Cup comes along. So, Steve, you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, thanks, mate. It's you know these European matches and the draws have just come along so quickly because everything's got to be fitted in before the World Cup break now. So the matches are going to come very thick, and yeah, I mean, there's been some tasty groups, hasn't there? I don't know if you got them in front of you there, Jonathan, but certainly, I mean, from a Glimt perspective, it was a real disappointment. They didn't qualify for the Champions League. Dinamo Zagreb obviously got ahead of them, but they've drawn quite a tasty group in the Europa League, which I think both gives them, it's like a treble whammy here of you got a glittering tie like Arsenal. You've still got half a chance of maybe qualifying second, and also with Zurich.
Let's start before we go into the draw. Let's first ask you how did before we will announce every single draw and then have a little brief discussion on it. But Steve, I do want to ask you, what was the reaction from Glimt about not going through? It was such a heartbreaking thing. Went to extra time. We didn't talk about it obviously last week because we didn't have a show. But could you just briefly sum up what the mood was after that before we talk about the draw?
Deflating, gutting, because it looked like they'd done enough to make it to penalties at least, and then Dinamo Zagreb scored, I think, 116th minute, 4 minutes from the end of extra time, and it ended up being a bit of a rout actually on aggregate. But yeah, I think they can have regrets from that game because from probably the start of the second half onwards in Zagreb, they were the better team. They got about level on aggregate. And I think they missed a trick. They could have kicked on and probably won it in normal time. Extra time was a bit cagey, 50-50 affair. And then it just came down into one moment, really, where they kind of broke the offside trap and there was a good save. And then the rebound went in. I don't know how it got through a bunch of Glimt legs. And it was a real shame. I mean, I think apart from Tromsø fans, maybe a few of the fans from some of the other big teams as well, I think it was a real disappointment because Norway hasn't had a team in the Champions League group stages for a long time now. So, it's probably the best chance they'll have to make the Champions League group stage for a long time.
Yeah, real shame. I remember I did actually watch the second half of I watched extra time in that game, and they kind of just ran out of steam, didn't they, a little bit, Glimt, in that match. And obviously, we would have loved them to be in that Champions League draw. They would have ended up, I think, in the same group as Chelsea, if I'm right. I think I'm right in saying Dinamo Zagreb.
Yeah,
obviously their conquerors are in a group with Chelsea, AC Milan, and Salzburg. So that's sort of like here's what you could have won. But let's look at our teams now and see who they will be playing. I'll read out the groups, Steve, and then we can sort of have a little bit of analysis of each one. So Europa League, we're going to talk about Glimt in a minute. To be fair to them, although it was a disappointment, they got a very nice Europa League draw. They will play Arsenal, which is a massive game for obviously us and in general for Glimt. They will play FC Zurich and they will also play PSV Eindhoven. Now, as we mentioned, the competition starts this week. First games, Zurich against Arsenal and PSV against Glimt. And then I'm just going to read out a few of the other European draws that are relevant to us. So you've got HJK. They managed to go through. I think they beat the Danish team, didn't they? Silkeborg knocked them out. And of course, they're the Finnish team and they will play Ludogorets, Real Betis and Roma, of course. Then moving on to Sweden, we've got a Group D in the Europa League as well. Malmö will play Braga, Union Berlin of Germany, and Union Saint-Gilloise of Belgium. So that's an exciting group as well for them. Obviously, they came through against Sivasspor, beating them 5-1 on aggregate in that one. And then obviously we've still got Manchester United in the Europa League as well as Arsenal this season. And then we've got, of course, Midtjylland, our friend of the podcast at Football in Denmark, Henry Nichols. Mitchell had been drawn with Feyenoord, Lazio, and Sturm Graz. Bit of an ultras special in that one. I think there'll be a few tasty games there. And that wraps it up in terms of our teams for the Europa League. Steve, let's just start with the Europa League and that reaction to the Glimt Arsenal game and a little bit on PSV as well. I mean, that's a juicy tie, isn't it?
Well, I think you've got it's a very tasty draw. I mean, Arsenal should win the group. I know they probably won't be at full strength in most of the games, but they've got huge depth. But second place is certainly up for grabs because, I mean, PSV Eindhoven, you'd expect, they are the favourites for second place, but they got knocked out by Rangers in the Champions League, so it's not like they're that brilliant or anything. They're a very offensive side under Ruud van Nistelrooy these days, I do believe. So, and FC Zurich, they are the champions of Switzerland. I think they have been a bit depleted in the transfer window recently, Zurich. So I don't know whether that will affect them too much. But it's a good draw for Glimt. They've got a nice match, double matchup with Arsenal back to back. There's maybe a chance of nicking second off PSV, and also, I think they've got to fancy themselves certainly at least to finish above Zurich, and get that drop down into the Conference League. But I don't know that much about Swiss football, so I don't want to completely disrespect FC Zurich on here. But I think it looks like a good group to me, and my reaction to Molde's group as well. I mean, it's great to see, obviously, them and Djurgården together. But Shamrock Rovers, I don't think are going to.
We'll come on to that. Let's stick with Europa League.
Of course, I forgot completely about this. Malmö are in the Europa League. For some reason, I thought they'd dropped down to conference, but I'd forgotten that one.
No, I just we haven't actually. They're in Molde in the Conference League, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second. Let's just wrap up the Europa League.
Yeah.
So I mean, a couple of the star players from PSV. They got Anwar El Ghazi just signed from Aston Villa. Obviously, as you mentioned, Ruud van Nistelrooy is the manager. They do have a decent squad. I mean, there's not any Nordic players, but they do have a tradition of sort of signing interesting players. They've got Jared Branthwaite as well from, I think, Everton on loan, or I don't know if it's a permanent deal. But just in terms of Glimt, what do you think they will get out of this group? If you were giving an early prediction, and
no,
let's just look at this PSV game. What's your sort of take and prediction on this one?
This PSV game could be decisive, actually, in terms of if they get out of the group or not. If they can actually get a result in Eindhoven, then there's a chance. But I just don't think they're in as good a phase right now as they were 12 months ago. And if I had to certainly predict something, I would say Arsenal win the group, PSV second. I do think Bodø Glimt have a good chance of getting third, though. So I hope they can get third and continue their European adventure into the new year in the Conference League knockouts. So yeah, that's. I mean, I'm excited at the group. Let's just say that. So Malmö then, and what do you think about this draw for Malmö, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, Malmö are in a massive crisis at the moment. We will talk about that, I guess, in part 2 of the podcast when we cover Sweden. But just to give you a sort of brief overview, they're losing games for fun, really. They haven't been in good form. Of course, they've done well in the Swedish Cup, which was last week. They won 9-0 against a team called Bralanda. But apart from that, and obviously the Sivasspor game, they're really struggling in the league. Now back-to-back defeats in the league. Haven't won in more than 3 games now in the league. So it's an interesting draw. I think they'll be happy with the kind of flavour of it. I mean, the money on offer, it's not as much as, for example, the Champions League, which is what they were in last season. Made a lot of money out of that, of course, playing teams like Juventus and Chelsea. But I don't think it's a necessarily bad draw in terms of their prospects of maybe progressing. I'll be totally honest. I think at the moment they are in transition with an interim manager, Andreas Georgsson, who formerly worked at Arsenal, in fact. He is still the interim manager, and I think that as it stands as of today, I don't think they would get out of the group. We are going to do a little Patreon episode just on a couple of European tips for this week, but I don't think they will get out of the group, if I'm being totally honest, as it stands as of today with the squad they have. I think Braga are a decent side. I think Union Berlin actually are a decent opponent as well, and Saint-Gilloise aren't that bad as well. I think they are the club that I think the owners of Brighton are connected with as well. I know they've got a few English players, Christian Burgess, Ross Sykes, and I know generally speaking their recruitment is pretty good. They actually have a Swedish player, Gustav Nielsen, and I remember, I think when we had Football in DK on the show, Henry, I remember him talking about Simon Adingra as well, who he went from Nordsjælland to Brighton, and then Brighton loaned him out to Saint-Gilloise. and he's, I think, a player to watch based on what Henry has been saying in previous episodes. So I think they will actually be a tougher opponent than maybe people might give them credit for as well. If I'm being totally honest, I think Malmö will have a job to finish third as well. I think this could be a tough one. But the Braga game this week, obviously, they want to get off to a good start. They're at home against Braga. It's a big game, and hopefully they can get a result. But as of now, I do worry about their chances, if I'm being honest.
I do agree. I think they finished bottom, to be honest, Jonathan. And the reason for that isn't necessarily because I think Malmö are that bad, but Braga are a really solid European team. Union Berlin, is it Union or Union? Union, I think. They're actually quite good, aren't they? They're not a bad team. And the Belgian side, I watched them against Rangers in the qualifiers. They beat them, I think, 2-0 first leg or something. They're quite a good. They're known for being a good defensive team. And I think Malmö have got their hands full if they're going to get out of the group. It's actually a deceptively tough group. So I think they're really unlucky here, I think, Malmö. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And then just to recap the games from this Thursday coming, we've got HJK play Real Betis. I think that's going to be a tough ask for them, maybe, the Finnish team. And also Sturm Graz against Midtjylland. So let's move on. It seems like, well, my prediction, I agree with you. I think Malmö will finish either third or bottom of that group. And you have obviously predicted Glimt maybe a similar fate. So maybe they could both drop into the Conference League. I think third place goes to a playoff, am I right? Or is it
third place goes to the Conference League knockout
directly?
Yeah.
So that might be the fate of both of those teams, to be honest. But I think the interesting thing is there'll be some really juicy matches.
Yeah.
And as the weeks go on, stay tuned on the Nordic Football Twitter at Nordic Football as well, because we will bring maybe some interviews, some exclusive content, and just generally covering those games. I mean, Glimt Arsenal, that's massive, really. So let's move on, as we said, to the Conference League now as well. I know you gave a little bit of a spoiler there, Steve, but I know you're eager as ever. Let's look at the Conference League draws. So just going to recap some of the teams in our region again. Group B, we've got Anderlecht, FCB, Steaua Bucharest, Silkeborg. Obviously, they got knocked out, as we mentioned, by Helsinki and dropped into the Conference League, and West Ham. So that's an interesting game. I'm sure Henry will be excited about that after West Ham played Viborg as well in the prior round. In terms of our teams as well, if you sort of scroll down and look through the groups, we've also got Group F, which is, Steve, we got our wish, didn't we?
We did, yeah. Finally.
We got the Nordic Football Podcast Classico. And it's not going to be Glimt Malmö, but we are going to have Djurgården against Molde. Loved this draw when it came out in Group F. They will play each other for supremacy. Potentially could both be champions of their leagues, but we'll come on to that later this season. But they are joined by Ghent of Belgium and Shamrock Rovers. So really exciting draw, to be honest. We've already had some people sort of messaging us about Shamrock Rovers, who Djurgården play this week. Obviously that's a massive game for the Irish team. And then further down, no, that's it actually for our teams. So Steve, what's your take on this Group F? Molde, Ghent, Djurgården, and Shamrock. From a Norwegian perspective, do you feel confident about Molde's chances? How do you feel about it? Their first game is this Thursday against Ghent at home.
Yeah, I think Molde will win the group. I think it's a good draw for both Molde and Djurgården. Let's be honest, Shamrock Rovers are going to finish bottom of this group. I'd be shocked if they get any points away from home, the Irish side. Nothing against them. At home, they might nick a few points. Ghent, I did some research into Ghent, actually, just today. And they're a bit of there's a lot of question marks about this team. They could be anything, I reckon. They could either be pretty good or pretty bad. Got a couple of interesting players in their squad. They've actually got Jens Petter Hauge on loan from Frankfurt. So he's going to be up against Molde. And then they've got the big Kenyan, Jonathan, Joseph Akumu at the back.
Yes.
so he's there as well. But they've had a bad start to the season domestically, and they got knocked out. They got knocked out of Europa League qualifying by Ammonia Nicosia. Now, if you're getting beaten 4-0 on aggregate by a Cypriot team, for me that's alarm bells. That is alarm bells. And so they've only qualified for the Conference League because they were so crap in the Europa League qualifying. So I think this Ghent side can probably be beaten. I think there's a lot of question marks here. They could be anything. But if Molde and Djurgården finished in the top two, I wouldn't be shocked here. I really wouldn't be shocked. But I'm from a Molde perspective, I'm pretty confident they're in great form domestically.
Top is a massive prediction. Fair play. I mean, you've looked at the squad like you said. Just to talk about Shamrock Rovers, I know you've mentioned them there. To be fair to them, they've come through, obviously, the Champions League qualifiers. They knocked out Hibernians. They then lost to Ludogorets on aggregate, but they did beat them at home 2-1, lost 3-0 away. I think it's their away form that's cost them in Europe.
That's the problem, innit?
They then played Shkupi in the Europa League, knocked them out. They beat them home and away, which is a decent result against a team from North Macedonia. They then played Ferencvaros. So, they have, to be fair to Shamrock, we can't knock them. They've done pretty well. They lost 4-0 away to Ferencvaros and then beat them at home 1-0. But that has got them their Conference League spot. Obviously, Ferencvaros, Hungarian team, obviously a massive club historically. So it looks to me as if, if we're looking at, for example, from a Djurgården perspective, I think their away trips, I think Shamrock they look like they could be quite decent at home. I think that Djurgården going away from home there, I can imagine Shamrock will be well up for it. I think it'll be a massive game for both sides. Djurgården, there was a massive party when they qualified. This is the first time they've qualified for the group stages of a European competition, I believe, in many, many years. And I can't remember exactly the stat. There was a really interesting stat in terms of how long it's been since they've been in European qualifying campaigns. It's in a long time anyway, and they were partying into the night. I think that from their point of view, if they can get a good result in the game against Shamrock away and then sort of take that as a platform, I think Djurgården Molde will be a really fascinating game. We always talk about it, Steve, don't we? Which league is better? Which teams are better? We'll get a chance to sort of get an answer really on, and they're both going to play each other back to back, home and away. And I think that will answer some questions. I think Molde will go in as favourites, definitely. Molde sort of dispatched Elfsborg. I think Djurgården are a much better team, but I still think that Molde will probably be favourites, like you say. And then it's just Ghent. I feel like Ghent physically, generally speaking, Belgian teams are quite physical, quite good at, quite dominant against Swedish teams, aren't they? They tend to sort of recruit mainly most of their players from there. So I think I'd have Ghent favourites. But I think it is doable. I think the home games in Stockholm are going to be in front of massive crowds, and the atmosphere and the mood around the camp at the moment is quite positive. So I think they might face some tricky away games, but I think at home they can feel confident. I'm not going to say they're going to win the group, but I think they can possibly finish second, if not third. So that's my sort of read on it. But yeah, some massive games. I mean, just looking to the Thursday games, as you mentioned there, I mentioned obviously Shamrock against Diff. Do you have a prediction for Molde against?
I think Molde have got a good chance of winning. They're actually odds-on favourite with the bookmakers to win that game, which just shows you that maybe Ghent are not. I mean, I think that they're the real wild card here, Ghent, because they won their Conference League group last year on 13 points, but they don't seem to have started this season very well. Their manager, I looked at his name. I have no idea how to pronounce the name of this guy, Hein van Heiserbroek. What a name! But it's an intriguing group. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. And we will be covering, obviously, Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League as things. Oh, well, not Champions League, but we'll be looking at it anyway, won't we? Every now and then, occasionally with longing eyes. But yeah, no, let's now switch over to, of course, like I said, if you tweet us any questions you have on the European matches. If you want to come on as a guest, if you're a fan or if you're affiliated to those clubs, I think it'd be interesting to maybe get some outside perspectives as well. But let's move on to our regular schedule programming now. Back to domestic matters. Steve, we're going to start in Norway, and there's been a massive game this weekend just gone. Yeah. And just before we do that, I just want to say, if you do want to get the extra Patreon content, we will preview some games. We've got a couple of betting tips and that kind of thing that we have on our weekend or weekly preview show. You can access that patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. We will have at least 2 selections from this week's European games. So if you do want a little bit extra content, you can go and sign up there. But Steve, this was a massive game in the title race. Glimt, Molde, the 2 biggest teams in the league, really, in terms of historically last 4 or 5 years, in terms of challenging for titles. How did it go?
Yeah, it finished Booty Glimt 1, Molde 4, and I think you can stick a fork in the Eliteserien title race now. It's done. It's done. Jonathan, 10-point gap now Molde have got to Booty Glimt and Lillestrøm, and an 11-point gap to Rosenborg. They're not going to blow that. There's only 9 games left. If they blew this, it'd be like Newcastle when you lot beat them to the title in the 90s. It's simply not going to happen, in my opinion. Molde have been exceptional this season. They had a bit of a dodgy start, but I think they're unbeaten in 16 games now, domestically, 15 or 16, and they've won the majority of those contests. So, this was a 4. It wasn't really a 4-1. type match. I mean, it was much closer than the scoreline would suggest. But crucially, and I think Kjetil Knutsen said this at the end of the game, Molde in both boxes were ultimately better. And I think that kind of sums up the season, really. They've been more efficient in the final third of the field, and they've been more efficient defensively this season than Glimt. I think Molde have been targeting Glimt all season. They changed. I think the manager Erling Moe changed the whole formation so that he could beat Glimt this season, and they played them 3 times and they've beaten them 3 times. So it looks like they're going to win the gold medal in the league. They won the cup final against them as well. And you got fair play to Erling Moe, who I've always praised on this show, in fairness. And they've been really hungry. It's not been plain sailing. They've had injuries and stuff. But in this particular game, I think their game plan worked out. The 3 centre-backs really does seem to work well against Glimt. And it was similar how Jose Mourinho stifled them, actually, eventually. Finally, Mourinho learned his lesson against Glimt. I think Molde took a leaf out of his textbook. And they just found it hard all season to really penetrate Molde enough. And great tactical game plan, but crucially, just a little bit of extra quality as well that Molde have seemed to have in these fixtures this season. And I mean, the second goal for Molde is spectacular. It really is. It was a fantastic goal from outside the penalty area. So, yeah, it looks like, I mean, I'm disappointed, I must say. Emil Breivik, who scored that goal, by the way. I'm disappointed because I would wanted this title race to hotten up and get close towards the end again. But it looks like it's going to be a procession, I think, to close out the campaign. Molde, fair play to them.
Firstly, I just want to ask, I mean, it's a massive result, like you said. Goals from Kassa, Amundsen, Breivik. Kassa got another one. Brynildsen in the 83rd minute made it a 4-1, kind of beating, really. Steve, I noticed a little bit of back and forth on Twitter between Molde and Glimt, a little bit of a needle. Could you just, is this becoming a bit of a Norwegian rivalry? Do you know what I mean? I know they've also been fighting for players this season, haven't they, in terms of trying to sign, players from other clubs. They've gone head-to-head on certain players. Is there just a little bit of a, I know like sometimes we have these dynasties that come up, don't we? Like, for example, City, Liverpool, or, United, Arsenal over the years. If you look at it from an English point of view, you get your kind of little rivalries come up. Is this one to look out for? Is this a growing rivalry, or is it a new rivalry? What's happening here? Because, I mean, that is a bit of a beating. And could you just explain the needle between the two teams as well?
I think I think you're right. I think a big rivalry has started to develop here, and in the transfer window. But you got Glimt splashing out £4 million on Patrick Berg. We're going to talk about that later. And they splashed the cash a bit, whereas Molde have been kind of outbidded and not been able to do that as much. And it's ironic. I think they were saying a few things about some of their actual own players that have come through their ranks have done well for them recently. Molde, like Breivik, and a few other youngsters that have signed more domestically. So. I think Molde can be a bit annoyed because if Glimt didn't exist, I think we'd be talking about a Molde dynasty right now. They've been a really well-run club in the last 4 or 5 years. They may well have won 4 titles in a row or something. And I think Glimt as well, if Molde weren't around, I still think Glimt would win this title this year. So, I think it's one of those. It's almost a bit like sort of tennis when Federer was sort of dominating, and Nadal came along, and it's like, they've been very evenly matched, really, overall over the last sort of 4 years. They've both had good moments, and this is Molde's year. They've come back, they've bounced back, they've been hungry, they've wanted it more. And Glimt and Kjetil Knutsen said Molde is the best this season. And the Twitter thing, this has been ongoing for 2 or 3 years now. I think sometimes it is a bit fairly good-natured. But there's definitely some spice there. Maybe a bit of needle as well. I think at the same time, there's quite a bit of respect though as well. It's not like blood-curling rivalry in that respect. But it's healthy, and it's probably a good thing, perhaps, that and another team is going to win the title this year. I know Molde won it before in recent times, but it sets things up interestingly for next season, where Glimt are going to want to respond. Likes of Rosenborg and others might want to get in the mixer as well. So big win for Molde. Fair play to them. You can't not beat. They've beaten Glimt 3 times this season, which is not many teams can say that in the last three seasons, Jonathan.
Yeah, definitely. And we do have some questions, but I think, as you mentioned, there's a really good goal, isn't it, from Breivik? And of course, you said, they went to kind of 3 or 5 at the back, depends how you want to sort of talk about it. Fofana and Eikrem up front, Breivik in the midfield there, Kassa as well got a goal. We've got one question from a loyal supporter of the podcast, Charlotte Patterson at Kirby Hazard. Always appreciate your support, Charlotte. She says, I know you've sort of answered it really, but can anyone out of Glimt, Lillestrøm, or Rosenborg catch Molde? Is this gap too big? You have kind of answered it, I suppose, but do you just want to reinforce the question? And is there any other outsiders besides Glimt that could maybe come into it or not? And thank you again, Charlotte, for your question.
I think the battle for the rest of the medals is going to be close. And there was another question about that, I think, but no one can catch Molde now, in my opinion. A team would have to win all 9 remaining games and hope that Molde lose 4 out of 9, I think. That's asking way too much. I just don't see that happening. So unless something really freakish happens, then it's just too much. It's insurmountable now. If Glimt had won that game, it would have certainly kept Glimt in the hunt, and it might have given the Lillestrøm and Rosenborg a little bit of hope. But I think Charlotte now, like I say, stick a fork in this title race, it's done.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And yeah, massive win for Molde, and it looks like they're going to end Glimt's 2 years straight of winning the title. It's not going to be a three-peat. It's going to be Molde potentially with 9 years to go, but there's still plenty to play for. So you never know. But as you mentioned there, Steve, it does look like maybe you can stick a fork in this one. Let's move on to the medal positions because, there's been a bit of topsy-turvy up and down, hasn't there? The teams fighting. You've got Glimt now down in second. There's only a gap of 1 point between second, third, and fourth, and then 4 further points back to fifth, which is Vålerenga in fifth. But tell us about the 3 teams in second, third, and fourth. Obviously, Glimt in second, but a bit of a battle coming on for these medal spots, isn't there, Steve?
Do you know what? There's question marks about every team in this race for the medals. Buda Glimt are obviously got a European campaign now, which might take it a bit out of them, and they're just not quite in full rhythm this season. So the question marks there. Lillestrøm, I've kind of said all year, when are they going to tail off? And they've not quite fired in the last sort of month and a half, really, 2 months. It's just not been there, and they're dropping points now. Rosenborg, I do like what Rosenborg have been doing, but their squad is so thin, Jonathan. I just can't believe Rosenborg have ended up with a squad so thin. Yes, it doesn't help. They've had some long-term injuries, but they really need to get the depth of that squad in a better condition going into next season, I think. And it might just cost them. The positive, though, they've got no European football to worry about. And you know what? If they can keep the momentum, they might be the team that gets second. And then Vålerenga are just going crazy guns in fifth. And I guess you can't rule them out of the medals now, but they've had such an incredible run. You got to wonder, have they kind of shot their load a little bit and they're due to drop some points? So, I mean, you're going to ask me for a prediction, aren't you? So I might as well give it now. If I had to say, I would just about go Glimt in second, Rosenborg third. Fourth and fifth between Lillestrøm and Vålerenga is close. I think I might just go Lillestrøm because they've got the 5-point buffer, but that's the way I would go.
Yeah, and just to recap some of the results because I haven't read them out. Vålerenga beat Lillestrøm 3-1 this weekend. Haugesund 2, Tromsø 1, Kristiansand 3, Sandefjord 1. Kristiansand getting a win. Strømsgodset 1, Arlesund 2, Rosenborg 4, Viking 1. Big win for Rosenborg. Sarpsborg 2, HamKam 1, Odd 2, Jerv 1. And then obviously that Glimt game. That was the first match of the weekend. Glimt losing 4-1 at home to Molde. So we do have 2 questions that I'm going to ask you now. You just mentioned there Vålerenga. We've got History Russia from Damon. He says, how did Vålerenga turn things around this season? Was it personnel, formation, tactics, or luck? And also, just tying on to that, Kyle Bullen at Kyle Bullen 4. Thanks a lot for your question, Kyle. He says, with 9 rounds left, how does the Eliteserien end up? I know you've given your prediction there a little bit, but he says also, do Rosenborg and maybe Vålerenga get into Europe, or do Buda and Lillestrøm hold them off? Now, I know you've answered it a little bit, but could you just touch on maybe what have Vålerenga done to turn this form around? And thank you as well to Damon.
It beats me, Jonathan, because we've said this before. I think Fadugba was literally 1 match away from the sack. And then they got a couple of wins on the board and they seemed to grow in confidence. But the mad thing was they actually lost players during this run. They lost the keeper, Kjetil Haug, to Toulouse. They lost Ivan Nasberg on a free transfer. They lost Chartenson. They lost Aaron Donham, who went back after a loan spell. And a couple of other guys, sort of squad players. So it's kind of mad that they kind of trimmed down the squad and improved. a massive reason why. They've won now. I think 7 of the last 8 games. It might even be 8 of the last 9. The star man Osame Sahoui has been in brilliant form. Now, he was really below his XG. His XG numbers were quite high for the first half of the season, but he was nowhere near getting them. And it's like turned it on its head now, second half of the season. This lad, when he's in great form, he's one of the best players in the league, if maybe even the best player in the league. Some might argue. He's been sensational recently, and he certainly was the key difference against Lillestrøm in the big derby game on Sunday evening. So I think his form has been massive for them. And, they've nicked a couple of close wins, beating Tromsø at home, Viking away. Those matches could have gone either way. I think earlier in the season, they probably would have found a way to lose those matches. I think that the manager has maybe allowed them to express themselves a bit more offensively, but I haven't noticed any major tactical differences personally. I think something behind the scenes, obviously for Germo, has shown his excellent man management skills. Maybe some of these players that left the club were actually bad eggs and a bad influence. Who knows? It's a really good question, and I'm kind of scratching my head how on earth they did manage to turn around this form. But turn around it, they did. Now, like I said, I just wonder if this run, when you're on such a good run, it's going to come to an end eventually, isn't it? And have they shot their load a little bit? And they certainly could get a medal spot if they maintain this push. But I'm a bit dubious that they're just due to draw. I think they've got some tougher fixtures coming up soon as well.
Yeah, I know we talked about them quite a lot earlier in the season. It seemed like Fadugba, like you said, was going to lose his job. Is this a testament to sort of how good a manager he is? Because I remember you saying at the time, like, he's a decent manager, maybe it's just wrong place.
Yeah.
Right, sort of, wrong place, wrong time type thing. And maybe it was just petering out. Then it's business, incredible revival. Is that, a lot down to the manager, or is it just the players have sort of turned their form around? Like, what can you say about that? Player versus manager, sort of. Who's sort of got them out of this hole more?
I think there's probably been a combination: the manager, the players, and also probably the backroom team. There've been a few. I think they've been. They've had an impact for sure as well. But yeah, you're right. If I was the president, if I was the chairman, I'd have sacked him. And not because I've always said it. I certainly do rate him as a manager. It just didn't feel like it was a good match anymore, and that I just didn't think he could get any more tune out of the players. How wrong was I? Like, I was completely made to eat my words there, because they've turned it around, and I think you've got to give credit to the manager here. He's obviously done. I think the man management side of things has been excellent. Tactically, like I said, I've not noticed any massive differences, apart from perhaps a little bit more offensive freedom. I just think it's some simple fact. Some of the players have just played better. Like Sahoui, he wasn't converting those chances before. And, they've been really up for it. It's been an incredible run. And I think that probably the key difference now, you feel with Vålerenga, that they've got goals in them. So if they concede, they can always outscore someone. Perhaps in the past, they were relying on like a clean sheet or a lower scoring match. But now they've got more goals in them. So I think that's really helped.
Yeah, and just looking at their expected goals, it's third in the league at this moment in time, 44.08 expected goals, according to our partners, Scout, 36 scored. Molde are top and Glimt second in that ranking, by the way, and Viking and Salzburg are fourth and fifth, by the way. And in terms of expected goals against, their expected goals against is relatively high, 28.63, mid-table in the league, really. And conceded 29, so more or less spot on in that sense. But hopefully that answers the two questions that we've just had on them. And let's move on to I want to ask you about the relegation battle, because number one, we got a question about it, and number two, it's looking fairly juicy. So I'm going to may as well start with the question, which is from. Let me just get the question. It is from P2P Alex P2P underscore Alex, regular listener and always interacts with us, so which we really appreciate. He says, Jerv and Christensen look doomed for the drop. Anyway, back for them now. And I know you've got on your itinerary a bit of a Christensen resurgence.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah, they've finally kind of come good. They've won the last two games, and they're up to 13 points in the table, only one behind Jerv now. I think I've said it for some time.
Weren't they on like 3 points or something before that.
Yeah, they've
Not
had
long
a
ago.
few games recently.
They got 7 points.
They've had a good run. They had a 2-week break. They had a match postponed, and they had a 2-week break from the 14th of August to 28th. And since then, 7 points from 3 games. Good draw away against Lillestrøm, and they beat Viking 2-1, and they beat Sandefjord 3-1. So, you'd say that they're not off the bottom of the table yet, but I think they will be soon because Jerv look doomed. I think completely. Looking in massive trouble, and I think Jerv will finish bottom. But I mean, Kristiansand are now 9 points off the playoff position, and it would have been just 6 had there not been a ridiculous Sarpsborg turnaround. I'll talk about that match soon. But I mean, of the two, they're certainly the more likely to potentially drag themselves out of trouble. But Kristiansand need some help now. They need one of those teams between 10th to 14th to just go on a shocking run of form. They need someone to go winless before the end of the season, or pick up maximum 3 or 4 points in the last 9 games, which is possible. Every year there's a team that suddenly gets sucked in. Maybe Sandefjord are in a bit of a mess. But Kristiansand certainly looking a lot more like their usual self. And it just makes me wonder, is it just too late this year for them? But I think they're going to be a bit of a pain in the arse to face now because, the tails are up. You're getting points on the board. They're counter-attacking well. I do like they've signed Faris Mumbanga, who scored a couple of goals against Viking. He's looked good. I think they've needed a focal point in their attack, a physical threat, and he has added a bit of them. So he looks like a good re-addition to the team. And they've had a little bit of luck go their way as well. They kind of hung on against Viking, and that's what happens. They never have been the worst team in the league this year. Jerv have always been the worst team. So I think eventually we're going to get them above them. But my gut feeling is it's just probably too late. They're asking too much of themselves. But you never know. 9 games left. Just got to get as many points as you can.
Yeah, they're giving themselves every chance. You're right in terms of Jerv underlying stats. They got the worst XG in the league by miles, 56.65, 48 conceded. Kristiansand actually aren't that bad. 39.2 and 40 conceded. It's fifth from bottom. Sarpsborg, Odd, and Sandefjord have worse expected goals against than Kristiansand. So you never know. Maybe they could turn it around a little bit, my boys. And in terms of the expected goals, actually, it's Hacken who are bottom, and Jerv second bottom. Again, Kristiansand fifth from bottom. Arlesund and Sandefjord, the other two who are lower than Kristiansand's 29.77 XG, 21 scored. So to be fair to Kristiansand, their underlying numbers suggest they're a team that should finish, maybe around 12th or 13th. So they're 10 points off that at the moment. Let's see if they can, keep this good run going. Only scored 21 all season in 21 games, but let's see if they can keep that run going. Steve, you did mention Jerv, and thanks again, Alex, for your question. I mean, also got Hacken there. We talked about their expected goals. Madness going on at Hacken. I saw your tweet. You weren't happy. Tom Dent, maybe close your ears if you're listening to this at the moment, because I feel like there's a meat man rant maybe coming on here.
Well, I mean, I was betting on this game on a Hacken handicap, which I thought was actually one of the best value bets of the season. There was no way Sarpsborg had just lost 8 games in a row, and they were a ridiculous odds-on favourite for this game. And Hacken led until the 93rd minute, and somehow lost the game. You won't believe it. I mean, it was a mad game anyway, because how it stayed 1-0 for so long, I've no idea. Hacken had several chances to finish off the game. Sarpsborg, to be fair, they actually had 2 or 3 big chances as well. Hit the crossbar. The goalkeeper made some good saves. But if you are leading 1-0 going into the 93rd minute, you've got to be winning the game of football, let alone losing it. But there was a late equaliser and then a penalty. I thought it was a bit of a soft penalty, to be honest. I mean, I'd need to look at it properly again, but I wasn't sure about it. And then, before you know it, 96th minute, the penalty's converted. The goalkeeper got a glove on it onto the post, but into the back of the net. And you talk about, I mean, if Sarpsborg lose that game, right, it's 9 defeats in a row. Stefan Bilborn, maybe he's out of a job. And they would look like the team who maybe Kristiansand could catch. That's going to completely turn around their season, Sarpsborg. I mean, as for Hacken, they were looking like they were going to be well clear of the relegation zone. And now suddenly they're right at 1 point above it. So it's a ridiculous phase of 3-4 minutes in stoppage time that has turned the whole table on its head. I can't believe. I mean, from a betting perspective for myself, it was one of the worst bad beats I've ever had. But I mean, put yourself in the Hamcam dressing room. I mean, how they must be feeling after that one. I mean, they'll be devastated. I mean, how do you pick yourself up after that? Didn't Leicester do that against Spurs last season in a match? It was some wild finish, but I mean, they won't believe it. But now it's game on. There's about 5 teams, I think, in the reckoning for the 14th spot. And yeah, I just feel like such a pivotal game. We'll look back at this game and we might think, bloody hell, that the madness in stoppage time was massive.
Yeah, first goal was from Hernandez Foster. Decent hit, by the way. Nice left-footed shot in the 4th minute. Skolovic, as you mentioned there, 92nd minute equaliser for Salzburg. And then Tobias Heinz, I think it is, formerly of Hacken last season. Penalty spot, 96th minute. Cool as he like, stepped up, kept his cool, and buried it. And yeah, like you say, it's a heartbreaker for Hamcam in terms of their league position. They're still 12th. Still, it's only 1 point above the relegation playoff place, but comfortably still at least 9 points above automatic relegation. So they're still in a decent position. But yeah, as you said, the nature of it, I think it was actually Spurs did it to Leicester, wasn't it? It was too late, not the other way around. Yeah, but yeah, craziness and big scenes there for Salzburg as well. But yeah, unlucky to Tom. Keep fighting, my friend of the podcast. I'm sure you'll bounce back, but. Yeah, and unfortunately, Steve, keep your money for next week. Maybe, hopefully, you'll.
Well, I mean,
have some more luck.
I had a good day. It was just, I mean, those things can happen, but I do feel for them there, and I hope they can keep their heads up because they've had a good season. They've been solid. They've only lost 6 games of football, Jonathan, and it would be a shame. I mean, if they win that, they're on a nice run of 8 points from 4 games. So I do hope they can rebound from it, and they deserve for me to stay up. So I hope they can sort of pick themselves up and get the results they need in the last 9 games. But yeah, that's a real, gut wrencher, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit of a sickener. And before we round up part 1, a couple of transfer bits of news. Patrick Berg is back as number 1, and we also want to give a bit of a shout out to Brand as well, don't we? Because they are also back in Eliteserien. Tell us about some of the deals. Tell us about that Patrick Berg deal. And then about Bran.
Yeah, I mean, Glimt have brought back Patrick Berg from Lens for £4.5 million, which is a huge amount of money for an Eliteserien club to pay. Obviously, goes without saying how important Berg is. And it didn't work out for him in Lens. He just wasn't getting the playing time that he wanted. He actually said he's glad he went there. He enjoyed his time there and everything, but he just couldn't break into that midfield. It doesn't help when you've got Seko Fofana, who's one of the best players in Ligue 1 right now, ahead of you in the pecking order. So, I mean, he was linked with a few clubs, Belgium, unsurprisingly, and all that. So I think it was a bit of a surprise to see him come back to Norway, to Glimt. But, and also Glimt brought back Marius Luda from Schalke on a free transfer. He left them at the start of the season. So it is a window where Glimt have certainly reinforced and splashed the cash a bit. A few other deals went through late on in the week. Thomas Len Olsen back to Lillestrøm, of course. Noah Jean Holm has moved to Stade de Reims in France from Rosenborg. An interesting, and we were talking about this off air, a lad called Peter Wilson, former GIF Sundsvall striker, has rocked up at Yerv, and he scored on his debut after just 11 minutes. I was like, who on earth is this P. Wilson, when I saw the score sheet and checked out his history? And he actually looks quite a good striker. If they can feed him enough chances, I think he'll score a few goals for Yerv. So there were certainly quite a few. As you can imagine, it was a wild end to the transfer window. Adam Diamande, another one coming to Odd, ex-former Los Angeles FC player, although he did go down injured at the weekend. So yeah, it's as you know, with all transfer windows, an absolute madness towards the end of it. And Bran, Jonathan, we must congratulate them. They are promoted back to the Eliteserien, still with 7 games to spare.
Yeah, massive. And congratulations to Bran. We did actually have a question on air. Another one of our on-air questions, Steve. A bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's from Dan Coys at Dan J. Deer. He says, can Bran win Eliteserien 2023 after sealing promotion with 7 games to go? Steve, in a sentence?
No. but I think they're top half. I think they'll be top half.
Yeah, they seem to have regenerated a bit like Lillestrøm did a few years back, and look where they are this season. Thanks a lot, Dan, and we will call it that a day there for part one. Welcome back, Patrick Berg, as well. I guess it didn't quite work out for him in France. I always felt like wasn't sure if Ligue 1 was the right maybe stage, but you never know. Maybe from here he can sort of kick on again. And I read the statement him saying he's a Buddha, he's a Buddha man, and kind of like it's a homecoming really for the whole club. So. I think his family's been at Glimt as well in the past, so it's a really nice move for them. Maybe we'll take the sting off that defeat to Molde a little bit. Coming up in part two, we'll review some of the transfers in Sweden and also look at the title race, relegation, and a couple of changes, manager changes. So join us after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss. I'm with Jonathan Fadugba. We're now going to talk about the Sweden Allsvenskan. And, we always seem to go back to transfers here, Jonathan. There's always so many big moves that go on. And even though the actual window was shut in Sweden, it didn't stop a few departures from the league at the end of August. So take us through some big ones, because there were certainly some money floated about.
Yeah, I mean, the transfer window is shut for Swedish teams 2 weeks before, I think, Norway, but that doesn't mean that players can't leave. So not ideal with the international, obviously, transfer window shutting just a few days ago. So, yeah, some obviously bad news for certain clubs because they've lost some players. Let's just sort of recap it. I thought it would be a good place to start here because, there's some big moves, actually, that could affect the rest of the season. Firstly, I think maybe we'll talk about Veljko Berman-Savic. Talked about him a lot on this podcast. I think I tweeted it about a week ago saying, I don't know if there's a clause in his Malmö contract that says he has to miss a chance from 6 yards out every week, because that's what he's been doing for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think I've never seen anyone miss so many high XG chances in a short space of time. I think it was a Kalmar game 2 weeks ago where he missed an unbelievable chance. We obviously talked about on a previous episode, he missed an open goal that was harder to miss than score. But he has been, in fairness to him, quite in reasonably good form. He is a good player. He was a central part of Malmö's title win last season. He was a really important player for them, I think, in general. And obviously we saw Antonio Cholak got his move to Rangers, and Berman-Savic has now got his move. He's moved to Toulouse. 3.7 million, according to Transfermarkt, the value of the transfer. He is a 24-year-old Serbian player who joined them a couple of years ago and obviously has won the title at Malmö, played in the Champions League campaign last year. And I'll be honest, he hasn't had an amazing start to the season, if I'm being totally honest. I think he's been worse this season than last season, if I'm being honest. Don't think he's been as effective. But he still managed to sort of put in some reasonable performances and show some potential that maybe Toulouse have seen. I know that Toulouse have already signed. I think they've gone for this sort of a data model that they're sort of scouting and recruiting data. I think Damien Comolli, the former Liverpool, I think he was one of the head scouts or something like that. I think he's a director at Toulouse now, I believe. And I know they do their recruitment in that sort of way. They signed Oliver Zanden as well from Elfsborg earlier in the season from Sweden. Really exciting left back who I think is a good signing as well. And yeah, so Berman-Savic has come about just literally the last few days of the window. This season, he's sort of done okay, I think. He did actually make his debut against Clermont Foot at the weekend just gone, came off the bench. And yeah, so, he's got his big move to out of Sweden. This season in Allsvenskan, he was on 18 games, 5 goals, 3 assists. Like I say, I don't think he was as good as, maybe he was the season before. His last game, obviously, for them in terms of the league was that Kalmar match, which, Malmö lost at home 1-0, and he missed some huge chances, as I said. But I think all in all, the money is good for Malmö in that sense, and I think it's a massive income for them. Other transfers to look at, just, there's a few outgoings just in the last few days, basically. Isaac Heen has made a move to Italy. He's a Djurgården centre-back. By the way, most of these players were in my fantasy team, so I've had to have a lot of reshuffling. I can't believe, I don't know if someone just looked at my team and bought every player, but Isaac Hean's been really good for Djurgården. It was no surprise really that he's left. I think I said it on a podcast about 2 or 3 weeks ago that he will get a big move. He's quality, in my opinion, and I think he could even go on from Hellas Verona. They signed him for roughly about £2.8 million, according to Transfermarkt again. 23-year-old centre-back, physical, strong, covers ground well, good frame, really important player for Djurgården. Could be a bit of a blow for their title race, but they have already signed Marcus Danielsson back, obviously their former captain, so they kind of covered him. Maybe they thought he was eventually going to leave. He left on August 27th with just a few days of the window remaining. Again, a really good player, I think. And at his young age, I think he will again go on. I could see him actually ending up close to the Premier League. I think he might do an Ahmed Hodzic, maybe end up at somewhere like Sheffield United or in the Championship. I really rate him. Then another player left, Kevin Jakob. Another one in my fantasy team. He is a young player from IFK Göteborg, 21-year-old. He's gone to Denmark, to Aarhus. He left, I think it's an undisclosed fee, so I'm not entirely sure how much for, but I think it's a good move. Obviously, Henry, Football in DK, will get some updates from him on it, but he was doing quite well in that IFK system. As a sort of forward, he can play out on the right or left. He's got a good shot, and then he's quite creative. And I do rate him. Also, they've lost Alexander Jallo, another one who was in my fantasy team. He's gone to Brescia in Italy. He's been there for quite a long time. They got him from Jönköping several years ago. He's a 24-year-old fullback. Again, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised he's gone to Serie B because I rate him. I think he could have gone to a top division club, but I guess I don't know the project at Brescia. Maybe it's an exciting project there. But he's been at EFK for 2 years now, and Steve, normally it's 6 months, isn't it? A year maybe, and they leave. So 2.5 years, I think, at EFK has probably served his time in Sweden, definitely, and spent his whole career in Sweden actually to this point. So a great move for him, about £350,000. Those are sort of maybe some of the main transfers out just in the last sort of few days of the window. So yeah, that's that kind of there has been a lot of people sort of leaving Sweden in the last week or two.
Yeah, the Bermancevic transfer is interesting. I mean, Toulouse do a lot of their scouting and transfers data driven. Well, they certainly wouldn't have been looking at XG conversion, would they? I mean, he misses a lot of chances, that lad, and you kind of worry, don't you? In a tougher league, that is he going to convert them? But I think Reece Healey lost Reece Healey to lose a striker to a season-ending injury or near enough season-ending. So I think he's kind of a replacement there. But I mean, that guy, I'll be honest, I looked at the fee for the Djurgården defender Isaac Hean. Hellas Verona reported nearly £3 million. I think that's a really good deal for Hellas Verona. He looks a really good defender.
Yeah, he's
so. I mean, good money for Diff. Don't get me wrong, but I think he feels like to me someone who could have been $5 million plus. What was the? Oh yeah, there was an interesting transfer I wanted to ask you about that Troyes have signed. Amar Abdulrahman Ahmed from Icor, 18-year-old lad. I reported £4 million. This was. I'm not sure exactly, but. Yeah, that's I mean, he must be a really bright prospect for Troyes to be paying that much.
Yeah, he's a good shout there. Amir Ahmed. I actually have a little bit of an exclusive, well, maybe not an exclusive, but I happen to know that because Troyes are owned by City Football Group, who own Manchester City and loads of other partner clubs around the world. They've got clubs in Japan, they've got clubs in, I think, Uruguay, they've got clubs in Spain. The City Football Group is a massive organization, but obviously headed up by Manchester City. I happen to know that Manchester City scouts watched Ahmed, I guess part of the City Football Group, when they played, I think it was Norrköping. And he did quite well in that game, obviously, and then has got his move to Troyes. So he will sort of enter their football group, maybe with a view to maybe in 2-3 years' time. Who knows if he does well? Maybe Manchester City might sort of bring him in. Who knows? He's an exciting talent. I think it was a move where he moved quite early. If that makes sense. He's barely really played. I think I remember a goal he scored against, I believe it was Degerfors, where he dribbled like about 3 players. I remember tweeting about it at the time. He's an 18-year-old sort of winger, sort of wide player, predominantly drifts off towards the left. And I remember thinking the goal he scored, I was like, that is some serious skill. He sort of cut inside, beat 3 or 4 men, and then put it into the net. So I do think he would be he's a project basically for Troyes. Don't know if he'll go straight into the team, but I think he is someone who could develop. But he's not played a huge amount of football, only 456 minutes this season in Allsvenskan, 1 goal, like I say. And indeed, it was that Degerfors game where they drew 1-1. So he's played very little football, but City, to be fair to them, they have good scouts, don't they?
Yeah.
They don't really tend to miss when it comes to identifying talent. So I imagine he's one to watch. There was a link. There was a rumor that Ayari as well from AIK was going to leave, but then it turned out that he hasn't left yet. So I guess he maybe for now isn't leaving. Just on Berman Savic, Andreas Georgsen, who is also the sporting director and current interim manager, he said, we wouldn't have sold him if we didn't think we had other players who were ready to take on that role. He said it's one of Malmö's biggest ever transfers. And obviously they've got, I think, a sell-on fee to lose, obviously, if they sell him on. He said, we thought it might have happened. We signed some players to be able to let Velko leave us and for it to not affect us too much. It's clear that when you're in form and when someone's in good playing time, it's a blow if they leave. But he said at the same time, it was a very good deal for the club. And it's a move he's really dreamed of to a big league. So when everything like that happened, we had to conclude the deal. So there you go. I mean, all in all, he's a good player, Berman Savic, as well, I have to say. And yeah, you're right about Amir Ahmed. I think he's a good player. And I agree with you, Heen. I think Heen is the better value transfer in terms of money paid than Berman Savic. My only worry with Berman Savic, and I think I did tweet this to someone, was that I think physically, is it another Patrick Berg maybe where can he deal with Liga, which is quite a physical league? I found him a little bit lacking in physicality, even in Allsvenskan in certain games. I think I mentioned it in a recent match where he, on a recent podcast where he had a chance and he just sort of like took 2 touches where he should have just hit it first time. I felt like his level had dipped in recent weeks and months. Maybe this transfer was in the back of his mind, but he just wasn't quite on it as he has been. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, good move for Malmö in terms of money.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it doesn't work out. I could see him warming the bench quite a lot, and it's a good project going on down at Toulouse. I'll say that though, and we wish him well there. But tough league if you're not physically where you want to be. I mean,
just to finish on that, Steve, he wasn't really even getting in. I mean, I don't know if there was a bit of a split between Georgsen and Berman Savic, but he wasn't actually really in the team a lot massively for even. He was in and out of the team. For Malmö, even, sometimes he was benched for European games, things like that. So he wasn't like something's been going on in the background. Maybe I don't know, but anyway, in total, 73 games, 29 goals, 13 assists. That's not a bad record, is it? Really? So
no, it's not.
Good luck to him.
Yeah, exactly. And Malmö also have got fairly decent. I mean, nearly £4 million. Yeah, I'm just looking at these transfers out. Does it kind of disappoint you a bit? I mean, I know this is always something that happens and always will happen, but, good players leaving the league when the transfer window is actually shut to bring players in.
It doesn't disappoint me, but I think obviously it's the nature of Allsvenskan. These players don't stick around that long. As I mentioned, I mean, if Jakob's been there a while because I know he's, I think he came through their academy. I'm not entirely. Oh no, I think he was at Hacken? Can't remember exactly right now off the top of my head. But he's been in Allsvenskan for a while. Berman Savic has only been there, a couple of years. Heen hasn't been there long at all. So it's the nature of Allsvenskan, really. You just have to take it for what it is. It's a great shopping market. I'm surprised we don't get contacted by more people in football, maybe asking opinions and stuff, because we have our 10 to watch, and you do have players that we sort of talk about, don't we, on the show every week, that kind of then get their move. I think people are becoming more and more wise to it. More and more clubs are looking now, and that's why people are leaving earlier and earlier. Obviously, we had Swedberg going for a record fee earlier in the season. Like, there's a lot of players leaving now for big money. And I think that will eventually come round on the league and help the league, because obviously the more money they got, the more they can reinvest it. So in a way, it's good for the clubs, to be honest. Getting these sort of big sums, 3 millions, 4 millions, that's decent. I remember in the past it would be maybe $1 million. The record transfers for these clubs are going up and up, so they're making more and more cash. And it's not just 1 or 2 teams; it's a lot of teams. EF Core now have just made decent sum there. Djurgården just made a decent sum there. So maybe it will help rebalance the league a little bit as well. So one thing I'd say as well, just to finalise on it, the Swedish clubs are not bad at scouting themselves. You know, Berman Savic, they got him from a Serb, I think from Eastern Europe somewhere, when he wasn't really doing a huge amount. You know, no one really knew much about him in terms of Central Europe. Heen, you know, he's been scouted from you know, I can't remember exactly where he's been scouted from, but he's, you know, another player who not many people knew about, who's sort of gone on. Where was it? Yeah, Vasselen they signed him from, which was like the third tier. You know, incredible scouting, to be honest. And now he's sold for 3 million after, you know, not even really more than a couple of years. They signed him in January 2021. So what's that, 18 months? And you know, he's now gone on for 3 million, nearly 4 million if you had add-ons. Jallo, people like that come from the second division at Jönköping. So I think it's a good sign for the health of the league. But obviously, as a spectacle, you do want to see the best players, don't you? And sometimes it's frustrating that, you know, we don't get to see the best of them before too long.
And I'd just like to wish the serious backup goalkeeper August Arlin all the best on his retirement. I did a bit of research into this because it was a bit of an unusual one. Retired at the age of 25, but apparently he got injured earlier in the season in the gym, ruled him out for the rest of the season, and he's decided to hang up his gloves at 25 years old. So we wish him all the best there. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next topic, Jonathan, which is Malmö FK, because not Malmö FK, Malmö FF, isn't it? Because they're in turmoil, Jonathan, right now. What is going on there? They're down as low as 7th in the league, I do believe. And I mean, this is terrible for them.
Yeah, well, I kind of alluded to it just then, saying that maybe a bit of unrest between Berman Savic and Georgsson in terms of just being in and out of the team. Berman Savic, like I said, his level has dropped, and I think the level of the whole Malmö team has dropped, to be honest. They're not in a good way right now, and they've lost another game this week, and they've lost to Elfsborg, which was quite a surprise, really. 3-2. Elfsborg themselves haven't really been having a great season. Probably weren't the favourites going into this match at all. I think people would have expected Malmö to maybe get back on track, but it sums Malmö up at this moment in time. I've seen a lot of fan accounts on Twitter and stuff really not happy with Malmö at all. The feeling is that maybe they've just thrown away the season. You know, their manager left months ago now, Milojevic, and they still don't have a replacement yet. Georgsson has said that, you know, the search for a new manager is kind of in full swing, and, you know, there's talk about they are looking to sign someone. But, you know, at the end of the day, he's the sporting director and he's also the manager. And his record in terms of points per game and things like that is not really great. So, you know, he came out afterwards. You know, after the Elfsborg game, the fans they were really angry. The players had to go and calm them down after the match in the away section, and there was a sort of angry exchange between fans and players, as sometimes happens. And you know, but Georgsson's had to come out and say, you know, it's not been a great time. You know, in Europe as well, they wanted to get Champions League football again, and it's not happened. As we've mentioned in part one of the show, you know, they're going to be playing. You know, they're not going to be in Champions League anyway, that's for sure. And it's just all gone a bit stale. They're not going to win. They're not going to win the title now. I think it's too late now. I think that's gone. You know, with the recent form they've been in, they lost at home to Kalmar the week before we did this podcast, and Kalmar were good value. It was a last minute own goal, but you know, Kalmar were pretty decent value to be honest. And Kalmar are above them in the table, currently 2 points clear of them in 6th. You know, Malmö are champions of Sweden and they're 7th. You know, only 3 points above Mjällby. So it's looking really like difficult for them now to win the league. They're 11 points off top of the table, which is Hacken. And yeah, it's just the season is kind of just petering out to a nothingness. No win since 14th of August, and even that GIF Sundsvall game at home, Steve, they won 3-1. They weren't even that great. It was just 3 goals in 6 minutes towards the end of the first half. Sundsvall just, you know, lost concentration for 6 minutes. And apart from that, they weren't even, you know, really sort of that dominant. It was just much of a muchness. So, yeah, not great times for Malmö.
Yeah, I don't even see them getting in Europe at this stage unless they win the Swedish Cup at the start of next year, of course. They're 6 points off that, but there's plenty of other teams in between them. If I had said to you at the start of the season after 21 games that there would only be 3 points above Mjällby, I mean, you know, you'd have said, what on earth are you smoking? I'll have some of that. But yeah, terrible times for Malmö. They've got this European campaign to look forward to, like I say, but it just doesn't feel like a very optimistic stage for them. I mean, what's going on with the manager situation? Jorgensen's obviously in charge. I mean, what about, is he going to be permanent long term? What they're going to do you think?
Well, Jorgensen definitely won't get the job. I think that he's kind of admitted himself now that it's not going to probably work out for him. I think that they are actively looking for a manager. So, I don't really know exactly where they are on that. It seems like it's not really clear where they are in that search. I mean, in good news for them, they've made a lot of money in the last year or so. I think they've announced this week that they've made roughly, well, they spent 80 million on transfer fees, 80 million kroners, which is about £8 million. And they put out a statement saying we've invested over 130 million this year in Malmö, up to including August. 80 million in player acquisitions, 50 million in facilities. That's about, I think, £5 million roughly, £4 or £5 million in facilities around the stadium. So they are, spending money. They signed Keith Italian, Zidane, Joseph Cisse, Maham Sibi, Emmanuel Lamotti, Buya Toure. So that, it's not like they're not spending. And they're making money, obviously, from Berman Savic, Arnel Ahmedhodzic. They got a fat chunk of money for him. I'm sure he might get a sell on because he's doing incredibly well for Sheffield United. I think the fans love him already there. So I suppose they've got the money. It's just a case of what, who they get in now to manage the club, because this season's almost a write-off, to be honest. And, the most recent comments from the chairman is that we're not quite there yet on a manager. It might take a little longer than we think, but it has to be right. They say that we have to get this right.
They really do have to get it right. That own goal that give Kalmar the 1-0 win, that cost me in fantasy. That did, Jonathan. It cost me 10 points. That goal knocked me out of the Allsvenskan Fantasy Cup. So that was rather disappointing for me, that own goal, because it cost me, I think, 10 points in total, the minus points plus 2 clean sheets. So, but that just sums up their luck, how things have been going for them recently. It's just a nightmare for Malmö. But
just to wrap up this section, Georgsen's points per game record, I think, at the moment is the lowest in Malmö's recent history. I think Georgsen is, according to Scannerlaget, which is an account on Twitter, he's averaging, I think, less than a point per game. Don't know if that's exactly true, but it's the lowest in a long time since, I think, since Daniel Andersson was caretaker manager. So, yeah, they, worse than, obviously, Milojevic was average, in fairness to him, he got sacked, but he was averaging 2 points a game. Georgsen's currently averaging half that. So just shows you that it's not gone, even sacking Milojevic hasn't really, seems to be no plan for who would replace him. So, yeah, it's not been very well dealt with, I don't think, this manager sacking. And maybe even, you could argue, hiring him in the first place.
Yeah, it's difficult times for Malmö. They have obviously got a trophy from this season, the Swedish Cup, but at the moment in the league, they're struggling. Top of the table remains Hacken on 45 points, Djurgården on 44, Hammarby on 40, and IK 39. Two of those teams dropped points this weekend, Hacken and Hammarby. So which one do you want to start with there, Jonathan?
Tough times for Hammarby. I think I'll just briefly give a bit of condolences to Marty Cifuentes on behalf of the podcast. He had a bereavement before the match. I think his father passed away, and obviously they've had a poor result tonight against Norrköping. Norrköping have beaten them and pretty comfortably 4-1. In fact, it's a massive loss, but when you sort of take into account those circumstances, it's kind of been easy for Cifuentes. He came out after the game and said it was, it's been really tough for him. Fair play to him for even being on the sideline, to be honest. Because he mentioned his father wanted to be here. He said, I'm sure my father would have wanted me to be here as well. So condolences to Marty Cifuentes, because that, as he said in his press conference, it's been a tough week. The players have given me a lot of strength. He went back to Barcelona, between Barcelona and the club, so clearly it might have affected training as well. And he just said that I really wanted to be here with the players today, but obviously the club has said I can take as much time off as I need. So seems like a good relationship between them. But in terms of Hammarby for the title race, this loss is a big blow for them. And when you read Fuentes' comments, you can tell that he's clearly affected by it. He said he's the one who got me into football. He loves football. He loved football. and he was a professional driver apparently in motorsports. I don't know for who or whatever, but he said he was the first person to take me to Barcelona as a youngster. We had a great relationship, and just from what he said in the press conference, you can tell he's obviously massively affected, even though he's still at work. And he even said that the plan with it was for his dad to come to Stockholm, and obviously, hopefully, see them lift the title. He said he had planned to come to Stockholm. He really wanted to come and visit, but in the end, he decided he would come when we won the league. So now I'm going to do my best to try and win the league. So really poignant comments there, and we wish Cifuentes all the best. But in terms of the game itself, yeah, they've taken a beating really 4-1. Norrköping obviously got a new manager now, Glenn Riddersholm, and he is sort of maybe starting to put his stamp on the club a little bit of a mini turnaround. He actually said at half time he went mad at the players. He said, I had a massive go at them. We were too bad individually for 10 minutes. And I told them that if they would only have 10 minutes, before there'd be consequences. So clearly putting his stamping his authority on the club, I guess. And it paid off. Obviously, they had 2 penalties in this game. So and at the end of the day, they were losing 1-0 and came back to win 4-1. But I feel like Hammarby maybe weren't quite focused on the match, maybe because of these circumstances. It leaves the table looking Hammarby are down to 3rd now, 5 points behind Hacken. Moving on to Hacken, they've obviously had also a tough result. We didn't talk about the podcast, sorry, just in Hammarby. We didn't talk about the derby the week before, Stockholm derby. They drew 2-2 with AIK away. That was quite an exciting game, actually. But yeah, in terms of Hacken, they played Degerfors at home. I think everybody expected an easy win. Didn't turn out that way. They've won 4 in a row, Hacken. They beat Varnamo 4-1 the week before, which was a massive result, to be fair. Not many teams do that to Varnamo. But yeah, this game against Degerfors of the weekend just gone. They were supposed to they should have won it quite comfortably. They needed an 88th minute Jeremiev goal, and it looked like he'd got them out of a rut. But then Vukojevic went up the other end, and in the ninth, in stoppage time, got Degerfors an equaliser, which is massive for Degerfors. But for Hacken, it's just 2 points dropped at a really crucial stage for them. They can't be dropping points like that really at home to sort of a team that's 3rd bottom of the league. It gave Djurgården a way back. Djurgården won 1-0 at Sirius, and it's now a gap of 1 point at the top.
Yeah, a couple of questions actually before we move on, and it's actually going back to Malmö here. This is from Adgar Dinsk on Twitter. Eric Thunderbird. Did you ever used to watch Thunderbirds on TV, Jonathan? I used to as a kid.
Yeah. Penelope?
Yes, that was it. Lady Penelope Parker, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Parker. Yes, my lady. And then she was like, oh, Parker. Anyway, what on earth? Anyway, Eric Thunderbird, thank you very much for this question. How low will Malmö go? What's your prediction on how they'll place at the end of the season?
If they don't get a new manager, then I think they will finish maybe 6th.
6th.
If they get a new manager, then who knows? Everything would have to talk again. But as of today, in terms of what's been going on at the club and the circumstances around it, plus obviously they've now got Europe to deal with. They've lost a key member of their squad. I don't think their squad is necessarily great. They've got the derby coming up. Then they've got Hammarby as well at home, EFK away. Then they've got Djurgården, Hacken away. So they've still got some very tough games. I don't think they'll finish in the top 3. That's my prediction.
And then another question from History Russia. Thank you very much for this one related to Hammarby. Can Hammarby win gold, or will they end up as the bridesmaid as per usual?
Yeah, and I think this is it Damon. I think he is actually a Hammarby fan. I've seen some of his tweets. And he did tweet us, I think, when it was 1-0 Hammarby and then they lost 4-1. Unfortunately, I don't think Hammarby will win the league. I feel like it's a 2-horse race now between Djurgården and Hacken. I think Hammarby still have a chance, but I just feel like they're a little bit too open at times. I just don't think they can collect enough clean sheets and sort of get the job done enough in big games. I just always feel like they're liable to concede a few. Berisha's a big signing. He started well, and he's got some goals recently. But I just feel like I don't even know if it's because they've signed a lot of players as well in the summer. I don't know if the balance has gone a little bit, but they can be a little bit flaky at times. So I do think they will peter off. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think they win the league. I would think Djurgården would finish above them.
Yeah, Djurgården are obviously going great guns at the moment. They've got Europe as a distraction coming up soon. They beat Sirius 1-0 at the weekend. I looked at the XG numbers for this game, not much in it. Seemed like quite a boring game, but on the face of it, this is the sort of place you've got to go and win 1-0 if you want to win titles, isn't it?
Serious?
Yeah, it's a tough place, isn't it? I mean, you know, a 1-0 win there can't be underestimated, and they've done their job.
Yeah, it's a big win for them. I think Djurgården are really looking good at the moment. Even bearing in mind that, as I just mentioned, losing Isaac Heen, they've had to rejig their defense. Obviously, Danielson's come in now, and Ekdal is having a good season as always. I think that maybe Hacken are favourites at the moment because of the just psychologically because they're top. Djurgården are sort of chasing them, and. Yeah, so by the way, just on Malmö, they haven't actually finished below third in the last 5 years. So in that terms of that prediction to finish outside the top three, that's massive.
Yeah.
If Malmö don't get in Europe, that's a massive. That's like a huge failure, by the way. So don't underestimate the prediction there in terms of if they can't get top three, there'll be major repercussions, I think, for them. But yeah, Thomas Lagerlof, obviously they got the joint manager there, Kim Bostrom. After the serious game, they sort of talked it down. They said they've tried to put the pressure on Hacken. They said they're in the driving seat. They're the ones who have to have the favourites tag. He said they're probably the favourites for a while yet, but we are fighting to get all our points. Don't forget they've obviously won the league in their management time in charge. I think 3 years ago now. I think they're quite wily old foxes, and I think putting the pressure on Hacken is a smart psychological move. But at the same time, they came out obviously. Victor Edvardsen got an assist, I think, and he came out and said, he was obviously happy about it. He's always got a comment in him. He's trying to do Degerfors, I think, a favour because he used to play for them. But he said, he's happy about Degerfors obviously getting a point at Hacken. He came out and said he's happy and he's going to send a message to, Degerfors joint managers to thank them for getting some points off Hacken. But Joel Olosoro also came out and said this is a huge game, really important to get these points. Sirius, as you said, is a tough place to go. And yeah, Edvardsen said every match from now is a final. We've got 10 more games in their finals. It's great. We're playing in Europe, and we will, do our best. By the way, Edvardsen, I don't know if I mentioned it on this podcast, but his goal in Europe, if you haven't seen it yet, I think it might even be a Puskas contender. Scored from the halfway line.
Yeah, I saw that. It was like David Beckham-esque, wasn't it?
Yeah, against Apoel. So he's been in reasonably good form, actually, Edvardsen recently, mainly assists. But good times for Diff. They're looking good.
Round 25, the two teams meet each other in Stockholm. Djurgården against Hacken. Still a few weeks away yet, and there's still a lot of massive games to come in the league. So I'll ask you now, who's going to win the title?
If you had to ask me today, I'd say Djurgården.
Djurgården, right? Okay, so let's move on. And do you know what? I was just thinking this. There's not been a managerial change in Eliteserien yet this season, I don't think. Unless I'm forgetting something. But in Sweden, it feels like half a league they've changed their managers. And there's going to be another change at Mjällby. Jonathan, tell us about this one.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Even Discovery, who obviously have the rights to Swedish football, they did a little sort of VT. They did a little discussion about this, just all the amount of changes that there's been managerially, and also a general kind of lack of like sort of planning, succession planning and stuff like that. And it was an interesting piece. I don't speak Swedish, so to be honest, I couldn't understand a lot of it, but I gathered some of it from the tweets and stuff like that and the analysis. But yeah, bad news for Mjällby fans, unfortunately. It's been announced that Andreas Brandstrom will terminate his contract. This news broke 4 or 5 days ago that he was in talks to terminate his deal. I think he had a board meeting and announced he will be leaving. I think there was a rumor that he's been approached by a team abroad. Mjällby refused to release him from his contract, and he said, "Well, okay, right, I'm off. I'm going to terminate my contract anyway." He's been brilliant as a manager. I think he's actually quite highly rated. There's a rumor that because basically Milos Milojevic has got a new job at Red Star, I think Belgrade. I think Poya Asbaghi, former Barnsley and EF Core manager, is going to be his assistant. But I think the rumor was that Brandstrom was going to take over as his assistant. Why he'd leave the head job to go to a foreign team assistant, I don't know. But of course, Mjällby are not a massive club really. They don't pay a huge amount. Maybe, I guess Red Star are a massive club. So I think also that they've worked together before, Brandstrom and Milojevic, but I could be wrong on that. But yeah, the bottom line of it is he's terminated his contract, which is supposed to run until the end of this year. He has an option, but I think they're not going to pursue it. He's free to sign for another club at the end of the season. He was there against EF Core Göteborg, but they've taken a battering from EF Core this evening, and I think that's a sign of like maybe the squad being distracted. And it's a bit of a shame. He's been a really good manager this season. Obviously carried on from Anders Torstensson, and they're eighth. They were eighth in the table before this round of fixtures. Now obviously they've taken a bit of a battering tonight, but I think that's more about the distraction than anything else. They're still eighth. But in general, they're having a very, very good season. Fantastic defensive coach. Gets his teams really organised, hard to break down, sort of deep block. I mentioned on one episode recently, they're a bit like sort of Burnley, maybe of the Swedish league in terms of the way they play. That sort of, not necessarily that Burnley always play a deep block, but just the reputation-wise. Bit of a Sean Dyche type manager maybe in reputation. So yeah, he'll be leaving, and he deserves a bigger job, to be honest. It wouldn't surprise me if teams like Malmö are looking at him as well closely.
Let's turn our attention towards the bottom of the table then. I see, first of all, just a quick word about a couple of teams who I know you were at one point a bit worried about in terms of Elfsborg and Norrköping. Slight revival for them two right now. Got themselves well clear of any danger. Better times for both those clubs?
Yeah, well, I mentioned Norrköping already. So yeah, they their new manager looks sort of decent. Watch this space. I think it's a bit early, but obviously a massive win against Hammarby. That'll sort of get the the fans turned out in numbers actually for this game. It looked like a good atmosphere. Norrköping generally are a good sort of well-supported club, and it's been a bit of a grim season for them in terms of the fans. I think in general the attendances had even gone down a little bit. It's not been a great time for their fans. So I think tonight's game will just give their fans that boost and think, yeah, maybe this new manager could do something. So I think maybe watch this space with them. Elfsborg, a little bit of a revival just in terms of beating Malmö. That's a massive result for them. They've not been amazing this season. I know the underlying numbers are positive for them in general when you look at their XG and stuff like that, but the league position, I guess they're up to 9th now, which is a little bit better. Before that they were a bit further down, but they've had, a few decent results. This win is big. 4 straight draws before that and a defeat to Djurgården, but maybe this win, their first win since June, don't forget. Maybe this win can sort of just give them a bit of a revival.
Yeah, and down at the bottom there, Jonathan, who are you worried about right now?
Some big results tonight. Varnamo with an Antonsson hat-trick beat Helsingborg 3-2. That was a big relegation game actually. They went 2-0 up, then Helsingborg got back into it 2-2. Mushin got 2. Well taken goals, by the way. He looked quite decent. But literally last kick of the game, it was a header. Antonsson from a corner, bullet header into the back of the net, 93rd minute. How do you like that? Last touch of the match. That lifts Varnamo to 12th, and a massive win for them because it takes them 6 points clear of the relegation playoff and also 8 points clear of Helsingborg. So this was a big sort of relegation game. And I know Varnamo, we've praised them, but they're still not out of it. And I think this is a massive win. Helsingborg have looked a little bit better in recent weeks. They play, obviously, they've played a few teams around them. They beat GIF Sundsvall away, and then they played Mjällby last week and lost at home. But they were a little bit unlucky. It was a late goal. They have sort of shown some fighting spirit, I think, in the last 3 or 4 weeks since that 5-0 defeat to Hacken. Maybe the new management team is sort of just turning it around a little bit. There's a few signs there that they look a little bit better, but obviously they're starting to run out of games a little bit. Their next two are EF Core away and then Malmö at home. Obviously the big derby down south there, and I think they need to maybe get something from one of those games at least. Actually, they do look a little bit better. But one other thing for them, they've had quite a few injury problems of late, and players missing games, and Armin Cijevic has left as well. So they do look like maybe they could be one to watch. And Degerfors as well, to their credit, have shown some fighting spirit. They beat GIF Sundsvall 3-1. They got a point obviously at Hacken. and they aren't looking that bad actually, Degerfors as well. So I think both of them will try and scramble out of this. Varberg aren't out of this, by the way. They're now 13th. They've lost to Kalmar. I thought they looked really poor in defensive transitions in this game this evening. I caught quite a bit of it. But in terms of GIF Sundsvall, I think it looks like they're probably gone. To be fair, 10 points.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it'd be a big surprise if GIF Sundsvall survive now. It just looks like, I mean, they're only 6 off the playoff spot, but I think that pretty much wraps it up for this episode, Jonathan, unless you got anything more to add about Sweden.
No, that'll be all. I think there's no more listener questions. Just want to say a big shout out to everyone who sent in questions, of course, on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Our YouTube channel's gaining quite a few subscribers these days, which is great if you want to listen to your pods there. But no, that's it from me.
Yeah, that's it from me as well. Do take care of yourselves. Thanks very much for listening. All your support out there. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.